This one's stylistically different and painted. We enter into this little collection of homes and outbuildings and barns. Someone who sells little knickknacks and maintains these properties. Maybe it's her mission to embellish these as though they were lived in. I wonder what that little device was for. Not to mention the one over near the table. But a nice oven, really. Tree. Just looks like it could easily come alive. One wonders if the ladies of the house, this house, in her day had time to embellish it. As a woman, she may have had no genetic alternative to make it pretty for her family. As with so many, a nice large room near the cooking stove, which provided heat for the cold times. And it's cool inside here, this center portion usually for livestock. But then this part over here may be the totally different sleeping quarters with its own stove. Maybe a separate family lived over here. Hard to tell. Nice wall clock. Here's storage of the food for the animals. And maybe up above, on top, for the humans. One like this might just as easily be found anywhere in the United States during its day. It doesn't appear to have a stove, but they had some strategy for it. There's this, again, grinding wheels here, and you could just work it like this. First time I've seen that, but that's clever, with that pivot point like that. First time I've seen it. And then this lever operated up and down so you could put more grain in there to be ground up. Imagine the labor it took just to make that, and how much easier it would have been to have it at that height than way down lower. The woman would have to bend down. Interesting stove. Simpler stove, elevated. Continue our little jaunt through town. What a pretty little town. You could well imagine taking a house like this, something small and modest, not this big, it's too big for me, putting it on my property in Arizona or somewhere, and then outfitting the inside. Absolutely modern cherry. Except where you could leave it as it originally was to add to the flavor of the whole structure. I've seen that kind of chandelier, for lack of a better term, where people are quite that tall. They're taller than I am. Looks like this room, which is all bound with clay or cement, its equivalent, was the kitchen to protect the rest of the house. And for cattle, who would have been hanging out right in the middle here where we are now. So you can imagine Mom getting lunch ready over here, or dinner, then having to push the cows out of the way to get across into the living room or dining room where they would eat. This looks like a replica of the other room, except this appears to be a cooking stove also. But large room like this, as it does today in the great room concept, could have served many functions simultaneously. Probably a substantial home with this nice treatment of the windows. Another dual purpose house and barn. just like the one outside Jackson. Much simpler and rustic than the other, but essentially the same. Probably the earlier part of the overall evolution. I remember in the day, having a home like this was great, even in its simplest form, because you had the security of your home, all the utensils you needed to do what needed to be done. Around you was the livestock and the fields to provide the sustenance, probably wild animals like deer that you could hunt for your larder. So as long as your family was healthy and you could eat and stay warm, this was great. It's interesting. I have no idea what it is. I doubt it's decoration. It's too substantial for that. A beautiful little complex with its own religious totem. Notice the detail on the top of the first floor and the lovely treatment of the windows, as well as having shutters. And this was a log house, pretty much in the tradition of the States. To be coped like Lincoln logs. And 2 rooms on either side, the living areas. And where I'm standing, where the few cattle or livestock you had might be in the wintertime to protect them. In the main family living room, whether there was any way to heat that other room for sleeping, I don't know. Doesn't appear to be. The theory was as long as you could get from here into the kitchen area where the stove was, you'd survive. That roof is done with, instead of just the occasional purlin, here it's solid purlins across the top. Would have been a substantial outbuilding for storage. I'm not sure animals were allowed in because that's where the grain was kept, I suspect, in those bins. Get the fine cut detail. It's someone who built this took the time to make it that much prettier, that much more interesting than it might otherwise have been. Did it indicate a easier life with more free time? Superb example of that. Here, a superb example of that on the corner, where the person's actually carved out flowers in a pot. How cool. Interesting. I don't know what this cement structure over here is. Is it part of the oven? But notice that oven very clearly designed to be in the center of the room, more or less. Nice wood plank flooring, which was probably an extravagance. The old spinning wheel. That one well done, so it came from the city. As did that little tiny, that I think is a sewing machine. Again, it must have been quite a luxury. But how great for the family. We get a clue. It's almost like a double stove. This is the other side of that oven. Was it used for cooking also? Did heat transfer back and forth? This room was great because you had another oven. But what's also interesting is it appears that this trough accommodated water. Is it possible a stream flowed through here? Of course, the well with that levered device for getting the water up. That far end had a rope on it, and you'd let go of the bucket down into the well, get your water, pull down until you got your hands on that, tie it off, and the water was right here for you. More mechanical wood machines. Fascinating, isn't it? How long wood survived as a viable material for machines. A pretty little sleigh. So we leave this huge open-air museum, some of which we have not explored, like that area over there, but I suspect a considerable amount of redundancy. We should be able to follow this road, which will hook to the left, I believe, and come out where I got off the bus near the freeway, and that should be a place where I can pick up a bus going back. Ho, ho, ho. Next part of the adventure. morning in Kaunas en route to Vilnius. Taking first class because it's only $1 more than second class. But theoretically, give me a better view from up higher. And off we go.